Hi, friends. Thank you for watching The Source, God's Answers to Life's Hard Questions. Today, I have a fantastic guest who I really believe can answer some of those very hard questions. I have Dr. Rabbi Eliezer Shore. Rabbi Shore has written two fantastic books, both of which I've read. The first is The Face of the Waters. There'll be links within this video so that you can buy them and research further. But The Face of the Waters, Chasidic Teachings and Stories for the 21st Century. The next is Meeting Elijah, and it is True Tales of Eliyahu Hanavi. The rabbi has also written numerous articles, published articles. He was an editor. He's a skilled storyteller. He's a teacher. He teaches Jewish spirituality in very prestigious universities, including Hebrew University. But I don't want to spend our time together reading his resume. I would rather speak to the rabbi, bring him off the pages, bring him to life. And with that, I introduce Rabbi Dr. Shore.
Thank you very much.
So much, Rabbi. I want to start with saying that someone will look at you and say, I can't relate, he's religious, he's a rabbi, he's a beard, he's a yarmulke, not my story. Next program on YouTube or wherever else. But people don't realize that you didn't start off religious. You grew up in a secular home and you were on a search toward God. And that search involved almost becoming a Buddhist. I know that you did Zen meditation. You learned Japanese. You studied Kung Fu. You were in an arts program. And then your life pivoted. So can you please tell me why your story is an everyman story and why we can relate to you as you went on your search?
Well, I started my search in college. I'll just review it quickly. I went to Sarah Lawrence College, which is a really fine liberal arts school just out of New York. And I was probably going to go into arts or theater or filmmaking. And then in the first semester of my junior year, I started feeling very dissatisfied with my classes, even though I was taking some fascinating classes in Eastern religion and philosophy. It wasn't my major, but I was interested in it. And yet I felt very dissatisfied. And I decided at that point that I would leave college for a year and I travel. And sort of at first I didn't quite realize that it was a spiritual search I was on. I just thought I just needed a break. And then as I was traveling, I picked up a book on Zen Buddhism and a book on this and a book on that and all these and then they really spoke to me so deeply. And I pursued that direction for a few years. Doing meditation, as you said, and doing martial arts and doing wilderness survival. And then not to go into all the details, but in my last year of college, I went through another shift and I started to become religious in a what you might call traditional sort of way, like not an Eastern way, but a way connected to my own personal faith. I grew up in a Jewish home. My parents were both secular, very reform, no religion at home. It was towards the end of my college career and my end of my final semester, I started thinking about spirituality differently. And I started thinking in terms of God more than in terms of just some sort of, Taoist or Buddhist kind of, which is non-deistic, which doesn't really have a belief in God. And it was that moment that I met a rabbi. And this rabbi was a teacher of Kabbalah and Hasidism. He was one of the early teachers of Kabbalah in America. And I was just totally captivated by him. And eventually became a student. And I studied with him for several years in America before moving to Israel. But that doesn't really answer your question. You want to know what makes it relevant to everybody? That's a good question. I think that everybody is really searching for something, and everybody wants more meaning in their life. Not everybody is drawn to Hasidism. Not everybody is drawn to Kabbalah. But I think everybody is drawn to something more meaningful. And I think everybody is drawn to some sort of more meaning. Rabbi Din, who was my first rabbi, used to say, what does meaning mean? When we say something is meaningful, what does it mean is meaningful? Right? Okay. And he used to say, and I think it's very profound, he used to say personhood. That when you connect personhood, in other words,
Rabbi,
Something
the lower part of you is falling a little bit out of the frame. That's better.
Okay,
That's okay.
So what he meant, how I understood what he meant, is that something is meaningful when we engage in it personally.
Okay.
Right. And especially other people are particularly meaningful. And my transition, let's say, from the Eastern religion to Judaism was one of looking for a personal relationship with God rather than sort of an impersonal. And as a teacher, and as a person who does counseling also somewhat, that's what people need, a personal relationship with another person. They need a personal relationship with the text. They need it with the tradition.
Okay.
And I think that's what makes life meaningful. That's what makes Judaism meaningful.
Okay.
Right?
Well, we're going to hit on those subjects. So it is written that when you are sincerely seeking for a teacher, he will appear. And
that's exactly what happened.
And that's exactly what happens to you.
Well, I wouldn't have said I was looking for a Hasidic teacher. That I was not.
But
that caught me by surprise.
You were looking for the truth. No matter which hand held the banner, you were looking for the truth. And it appeared to you. So
and I will tell you this: it was not an easy transition. It took me from the time I met Rabbi Din to the time I finally decided to become observant. It took about a year.
So on that subject, I just want to ask you, because you wrote you were drawn to his teachings and his personality as much as you were terrified and repulsed by them because they demanded commitments to a path, and that meant major changes in your life. That's from your book.
That's true.
How do you do that? How do you do that? Please tell me how you change your life. From Kung Fu to Tefillin, that's quite a leap that maybe even Bruce Lee couldn't conjure.
Look, it wasn't easy. I'm to tell you honestly. I used to want to run away. I didn't want to become religious. First of all, for many reasons. First of all, I was the whole thing of changing the way I dress, of standing out, of looking different, putting a kippah on. It was all a major challenge, right? And then to shift my way of thinking about spirituality, because you see, in Buddhism, for instance, which is until today, I find a beautiful religion, very profound, and I'm still very inspired by the texts. In Buddhism, there are, let's say, spiritual practices that you do, such as meditation, but they're not commandments. You wouldn't say God wants you to do this thing, right? You would say these are good pieces of advice that you should do if you would like to have this spiritual experience. And it was a major transition for me. I remember till now, like thinking, no, maybe there's not only a God, but maybe God actually wants you to do something, right? That was a major shift. Afterwards, I saw that it's not so simple, that there are alternative views, even within Judaism, to sort of how you view the Torah and how you view the mitzvot. The Zohar says the mitzvot are only pieces of advice to bring you to closeness to God. So that also sounds much more palatable. To a Buddhist, that would sound palatable. Okay, pieces of advice, I can follow that.
Okay, so
but it wasn't easy.
This is a perfect transition, I think, to my next question. And it is, why does Judaism have to be like a full commitment? Some people are cardiac Jews. I'm good in my heart. I'm a nice person. I give tzedakah once in a while. I have the tax receipts to prove it. Why does it have to be all or nothing? And does it have to be?
Does it have to be? I don't think it has to be.
You don't have to do everything? Keep kosher, keep Shabbat, keep mikvah, keep sniut. It doesn't have to be all or nothing?
Do you have to be? Do you have to? Rabbi Din used to say that Judaism is Jewish practice, let's say Orthodox practice. He used to say it's sort of like he used to teach us like a spiritual practice. He called it like a yoga in the sense of a complete spiritual practice. He would say, you can't go to a yogi and say, I want this experience, but I'm not willing to do this posture or this meditation. If you want the experience, then it's a package deal, right? So he taught us, and I've since seen this many places in countless other books since more than 30 years ago, so I was a student, that if you want this spiritual result, I'm talking now for a person who longs for spiritual experience, or who longs for a connection to God, who longs for some deep level of refinement and self-perfection. If you want that, then you have here a very beautiful and very, very well thought out path how to get there.
Okay.
And you're following a path that's been, and if it doesn't talk to you, it doesn't talk to you. I mean, should you do it? Will you benefit from doing it? Of course, you always benefit from doing it, right? Do you have to do it?
Judaism and the Torah are not recommendations. I mean, there's a difference between commandment and recommendation. Yes?
Yes, but we're human beings,
Okay.
Like, we have free will.
That I understand.
And
but
we have free.
Like, I can tell you growing up, I was not religious, but I never accommodated to a lower standard in my mindset. I knew I wasn't doing what I had to do. So yes, there's room to know, like, to make mistakes, but at least you know what the standard is. I mean, I think that the standard.
But today, I don't think most people know even that today. I think people are not even aware of that. No. I didn't know that. When I grew up, I knew nothing. Literally, for me, I remember Rosh Hashanah would come around in the fall. I was like, oh yeah, this is the Jewish New Year. Oh yeah, there's a Chinese New Year, there's a Jewish New Year. It's like, it didn't mean anything, Now, I'm going to be honestly, what you're saying is correct. Like the transition, but this itself is a major transition. This is the transition, Aliza. In other words, the transition from thinking I could do what I want to I do it because it's demanded of me or I'm commanded to do it is a major shift. It's a major shift. And once you make that shift, your whole relationship changes. And then, yes, you do, even if you can't do everything, but you should do everything. But until you make that shift, I don't think you can even make a demand of somebody because you're in a totally different headspace. You're in a headspace that says, no, I do what's good for me or I do what I want. And in that space, okay, so you do what you want, take what you can, do what you feel. Judaism is not New Age, right? New Age religion is all about what's good for me. I may be a spiritual seeker. It's true. I may look for some higher experience, but ultimately I'm the one who chooses what to do. And I'm the one who is at the center of the spirituality. And I think the major change and shift in the way of thinking with true Judaism is that you realize you're not the center, that God is at the center. And I have to sort of align myself with his will, right? Okay. And his will is, his will in the particular commandments and his will in general, whatever that means.
Okay, so
that's a major shift. Okay. It's not an easy shift. It's not an easy shift to make. It really is not.
God's will is not a simple will. It comes along with a big package. So is Judaism a killjoy? You had interest in arts and music. Does Judaism kind of kill the I? It kills off the things that I like, my unique personality.
I never felt that. And
I'm asking you. I'm not. It's not a statement.
I think that some people may feel that way, certainly from the outside. And I think that let's talk about, there's a very big difference between myself as a Baal Tshuva, somebody who came to Judaism later, and people who were born in it. I'm always surprised by how much flexibility people who are born in it seem to have, right? That many Baal Tshuva are much more like, oh, I've got to get it all right, And yet I look at my kids who are older in their 20s, or people I know, and they're much more relaxed about it. Of course, they do whatever they do, and they do as much as they can do, but they're much more relaxed about it. It's we people come into it who somehow think, oh, I have to get it all right and perfect, or I'm making a mistake.
So right? we're hard on ourselves, right?
We do. We are. We do, and we are. But what would you repeat the question again? Because I had something to say.
Is Judaism and all these rules a killjoy, and is it a kill I?
No, I don't think so. I think it definitely everything is just a matter of framework. You understand? In other words, what's the framework that you're working in, right? So we have a framework in Western society. It sort of defines our values, and everything we do, sort of fits in that framework one way or the other, right? How we dress, how we look, what we think, what our values are. And Judaism offers a different framework. Now, you could do many of the same things, or maybe even most of the same things, but the framework might be different, okay? A simple example with my wife. My wife is an actress, but she also is a Baal Tshuva. She's from Argentina, and she was an actress in Argentina. And she was actually on the verge of really becoming famous. She was very good. She was very attractive, and she was a good actress. And she almost got a job in a very important television series. And then she didn't like the culture. She felt that the whole TV culture was corrupt. She didn't like it. Maybe corrupt is too strong a word, but she didn't like it. And just at that time, she started learning about Judaism, and she eventually became religious, right? So when I first met her and we first dated, she said to me, I gave up my acting, and I'm not allowed to do it anymore. And I said to her, who told you you're not allowed to do it anymore? I said, go and do it. And so she went back to do it. At a certain point later, after we'd been married for a few years, I said to her, and she wasn't acting at that point. I said to her, I said, you're so good. You have such a beautiful presentation. Why don't you start a blog, like a video blog? So she started teaching kosher recipes online and making videos. And now she's kind of famous in South America. She has a beautiful presentation.
She redirected her talent and her purpose to serve in a Jewish way.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on a little, Rabbi. Okay, we'll pick up the pace because you didn't want this to go on too long. So I'm going to go by your standard, your request. As an Orthodox rabbi, Orthodox, correct? Yes? Okay.
That's apparently, yeah.
Okay, I know, some things I didn't expect to hear. What's the number one question you usually get asked by somebody who's not observant? I know me, as I made tshuva and I became more religious, people say, well, there were no cars in the desert. Why can't I drive on Shabbat? So from the non-observant Jews, what do you feel is a question that you get often, and how do you answer it? None comes to mind. Believe me, they call me the queen of questions for a good reason. There's 700 more to go until next Rosh Hashanah. We're good.
That's a good question. Sometimes people ask me, in the positive sense, right? Where should they start, right? Like if they want to start, what should they do? And I think, quoting the Baal Shem Tov, the place to start is keep Shabbat, even a little bit, right? Even one small thing, just start with that. And I think
like not turning on your cell phone or not opening a light.
Yeah, anything, not turning the light on, not cooking, not driving.
So it doesn't have to be everything or nothing. Because a lot of people don't want to be a hypocrite. I'm using the TV, but the lights, why not?
No.
So it's okay to be a hypocrite and do a little bit?
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Everything is good. Even a little
everything is good. Okay.
Absolutely. Anything you do, and again, to do it, just to get a taste of what it's like, right?
Right.
Because it is very special. It is very special, right? And I think once people start, they realize, wow, this is something which is very special. Okay. Obviously, to do it further and more, then has a stronger effect, let's say, but that's one thing. I think keeping kosher is very important because kosher food helps purify the soul. That's definitely found in all the books, right?
Okay.
And opens up the heart. And non-kosher food has the opposite. I would say those are the two. And I think that's one thing I recommend. When people want a little more spirituality, and actually somebody just recently, one of my students, she asked just this question. She said, well, how can we have a deeper spiritual experience? And I said, for that, you need solitude. You just make sure you go spend time by yourself in the woods, in a park. And I just think that's invaluable. Whether you believe in God or not, I think there's nothing compares to being alone for some time a day, without distractions, without the phone, it's something, it deepens a person,
I have to tell you, I would be a great Breslov Chassid because I don't like people. I like to be alone. It's perfect for me. I go in the woods. If we get Wi-Fi in the woods, you'd find me there all the time.
Well, if you had Wi-Fi in the woods, it wouldn't be worth going there.
Yeah, I know. You see? Rabbi, I want to go to your book. Okay, I haven't had a few more questions, but I'll leave them to the end because I'm looking at the
fine.
point.
Thank you.
Meeting Elijah, True Tales of Eliyahu Hanavi. So I was at a bookstore in Florida. I forgot the name, Jewish bookstore. And usually I'm looking for books on Parashat HaShavua, more explanations, unique explanations. And I came across this book. And the cover is beautiful. It caught me. And I opened it up. I said, okay, let me just fast see what this is about. And I found myself reading for a long time in the bookstore. A very fascinating book. Let me just start by saying, for those who don't know, meeting Elijah, you're referring to Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi is a prophet. He's one of, I think, 7 or 8 people who never died in our belief, and that he went directly to heaven. We believe he comes to every bris milah, and also we look for him on Passover. We pour the cup of Elijah as a little girl, and I'm sure in every family we're looking, did he drink, did he come? I never had witness that he showed up. But then I pick up this book of people who tell life stories, real, true, verified life stories, which you heard firsthand. And they met Elijah in one way or another, that he interceded on their behalf, and their life was either saved or greatly improved because he was there. Now, one, I need to ask you, first of all, how did these stories come to you? And then why did you, like so many, enough to get a book, and why did you feel compelled to write this book?
Thank you. So first of all, as I mentioned, we spoke once before, many stories happened to me. Many of the stories in the book happened to me, and I didn't write them all in my name. I only wrote a couple in my name, but I kind of felt a little embarrassed. But they happened to me.
Okay, but there's a lot of stories in there. If yours are
so what happened was, because I was so personally inspired by those stories, and because I love telling stories, I'm a storyteller. So I used to share the stories with my students or at my Shabbos table, and over the years, people would say, "Oh, like I have a story, and I have a story," and I would hear more and more stories, and I slowly started to collect them. And then at a certain point, when I had like 30 stories maybe, I said, I'm going to devote some time every morning and start writing them down. And I wrote about 30 stories. I sent them to a publisher, and they said, well, it's very nice, but we need more. And then, like, miraculously, within a very short period of time, I heard another one. And
how many are in the book?
Almost 60, close to 60 stories, like 57.
Okay.
And I just devoted time to writing them down. And when I write, I get very emotional. So I get my heart into the reading.
As I said at the beginning, as a writer, I tend to be critical of other writers. If I did it, I can do it better. But with your books, I'm like, wow, I wish I could write that well, and I wish I wrote that sentence.
Thank you.
So really,
thank you.
Amazing, Rabbi.
And I think I felt in the end compelled to write it because for two reasons. One, because the number of the stories happened to me, and I did want to share them. But also because I really want to share what you might call my personal worldview. And my personal worldview is I try and live as much as I can with, you might say, a sense of closeness to God. And I think these stories illustrate that every story is a moment of prayer, or a moment of crisis, or a moment of indecision, or doubt, or hopelessness. Somebody steps in and helps. And whether it's Elijah, or whether it's, you might call an emissary of Elijah, like a human being who's sort of fulfilling that role, it's an answer to a prayer. And I'm sensitive in my own life, and so I just want to share that. And plus, I think also it really shows you that the world is in the end a mysterious place. And I want to just say this one point. It's very important. To me, Judaism is not about having answers. Judaism is about asking questions. I always tell that to my students.
So I should rename this show then, God's Answers to Life's Hard Questions. I should just go, God's Hard Questions.
That's a great name. It's a great name. And as a teacher, for instance, I always tell my students, I feel myself a good teacher when you come away from my course with more questions than you had when you came in, not more answers.
Excellent.
And I feel that when I wrote the book, I want people to get a sense that the world we live in is a mysterious place.
Rabbi, just as a teaser, 2 great stories. One happened to you, so you say that it happened to you in memoriam, where you stopped every morning on your way to school to make a prayer at a site where people who had died in a terrorist attack, you were always stopping there to say that their souls should have an aliyah, to commemorate their tragedy. One day you didn't do it. Something happened. I'm not saying what. The reader wants to know. They will read the book. It's an incredible story. The one that touched me, just because I was a New Yorker who worked overtime, who dragged my feet through some night shifts in the newsroom during the war with Saddam Hussein, and you're exhausted. One story of a man who gets on to the bus after work 3 nights in a row. He's working late. Mad at the world, he has to work late. It was almost bad enough He's sitting at the back of the bus. Somebody steps onto the bus and mugs him. And he's searching for answers. He's a religious man. He wants to know, why did this happen to me? 20 years later, he finds out why. I will not say how. Again.
Aliza, you're a very good storyteller.
But that story really, because in moments of crisis, why did this happen to me? And I don't deserve it. And I'm such a good person. And we don't always know. We won't always be lucky enough to know in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, why. But this person did know. And that's quite a powerful story. After you wrote this book, Eliyahu Hanavi comes to visit people, right? A lot of people in this book claim they met him. After you wrote this book, did you have an encounter, an Eliyahu encounter, that he validated your work, that he acknowledged it in a dream?
That's such a good question. I'm not directly, only the fact that people have since come and told me, oh, I have more stories, and another story, another story. I recently heard a story from a woman. I'm not going to say it. I haven't written it up yet.
Okay.
She called me up. She said, I bought your book. I love it. She says, I have the most amazing story you've ever heard. And I've heard a lot of stories. I said, okay. And it happened to her aunt who went through the Holocaust. It is the most, it's so absolutely amazing that I can't believe it. And I believe a lot of things. I have like a very wide spectrum for belief. And yet she says she heard it from her aunt. Her cousin wrote it up in a book about the families, how they went through the Holocaust. Wow. When I write it up, I'll send you a copy because it's something unbelievable.
Sure, I would love to. Did you find through all this project of hearing stories about Eliyahu, because I would really like to meet him or have some experience, were there people who were like predisposed or they had more of a likelihood to have an interaction with him than others?
Yeah, definitely so.
What did they do different than I'm doing? Or most people I know?
Well, first of all, a lot of people who read the book, I was very satisfied with this. A lot of people, after they read it, they started saying, oh, that incident which happened to me, that was that type of incident. It was that chance encounter where somebody helped somebody or I helped somebody else. I never thought of it in that light. In fact, one of the stories in the book, I heard from a young man, and I said to him, tell me a story like this. And he told me a story. And after I sent the book to him, he said, wow, he said, thank you. I never myself understood the story in my own life in that way, right? So I think it's partly a matter of consciousness, just being aware of it, right? Like it could be a small thing, could be just somebody helping you out in a small way when you need it, and that is itself, in a sort of sense, what I call in the book, it's the spirit of Elijah, right?
Right.
And I think I think, and I said this before, I think it has to do the more you pray, the more you feel connected to Hashem,
the more
you're in that sort of. The more you that sort of, I don't mean prayer like from the book. I mean, the more in that sort of ongoing sense of talking to Hashem and turning to Hashem and asking God, for direction and guidance. And the more you open yourself up to having these encounters, that's how it seems to me.
I heard, I'm sure you heard this story. It's a popular story about somebody who went to his Rebbe and said, I really want to meet Eliyahu Hanavi. Do you know this story? And the rabbi says to him, you want to meet Eliyahu? He's so insistent on it, he won't give up. So right. His Rebbe tells him, go to this town, to this house, and you'll meet Elijah over there. If you know it, you can pick up because you're the storyteller.
I think that's the last story in the book.
Then please complete it for me.
The story goes about the Baal Shem Tov, that one of his Chasidim wanted to meet Elijah and begged. Finally, the Baal Shem Tov said, okay, go to this town. It's go there. You have to go there for the Shabbat. You have to take a leave of your family. When you get to the town, go to the market, buy a large basket of food and fish and meat and go to this little house at the end of the town, a little broken down house, and just wait there. And when you'll hear the signal, you'll know what to do. So the Chassid gets permission from his wife and he travels to this town and he finds the market. He walks down the lane. He finds this old broken down house. The windows are broken. The roof is leaking. And he stands outside with his basket of food. And he's listening, and all of a sudden he hears a child inside saying, Mommy, Ima, it's almost Shabbat. What are we going to do? We have no food, right? At that moment, he realizes that's a sign. He knocks on the door. They open the door, and he invites himself in, and he gives an excuse why he needs to stay there. And it's a very, very poor family. In the end, they invite him, and he provides all their food, okay? The whole Shabbat, he's waiting. When will I see Elijah? When will I see Elijah? And the Baal Shem Tov said, if you do this, you can see Elijah. He's looking out the window. He's looking at the synagogue. He's waiting after Shabbat. He's waiting. Nothing. He goes back to Baal Shem Tov. He says, I did what you said. I didn't see Elijah. Baal Shem Tov says, no, go again. Do it again. Go again next week. And I'm sure you'll see him. So again, he goes again next week. He buys the food. He goes to this poor house. He stands outside the door waiting for the sign, right? And he hears the child inside saying, Mommy, we have no food. It's almost Shabbat. What will we do? And she says, don't worry. Elijah will bring it for us this week like he brought it last week. And at that moment, he realized who Elijah was in that story.
So any one of us can be an Elijah to somebody. Also. I heard a beautiful Torah thought from a young man. I forgot his last name. He passed away very young. He passed away when he was around 20. He had some congenital disease. But there's a verse that says, Nar haiti v'gam zakanti v'lo riti tzaddik nezav v'zaro mevakesh lachem. He says, I was young and I'm old. I've never seen a righteous man be abandoned or his children beg for bread. Right.
So the young man, his name was Rafi, I forgot his last name. He said, how is it possible a person can say, I've never seen a righteous man abandoned? We read in the news all the time about people who are abandoned, right? The answer is, I never saw it. Because if I saw it, I went and I helped him. Right?
Beautiful. Rabbi, I have so many questions. I'm not going to go ahead with them because I want to leave you time. I have one last question, and then I will let you say things, that you might want to say, because sometimes it's like preparing for a test. The teacher didn't ask me everything I studied for. So maybe there were certain subjects that you wanted to talk about that I didn't bring up. But my last question will be, and I knew this, but from your book too, the Vilna Gaon says that hell's greatest torture lies in showing a person what he or she could have been, as opposed to what we amounted to in this lifetime. And I think with the self-help market being a $4.8 billion market, people want to be the best version of themselves. People want to be better. But how do we know what to do? Do I know if my mandate from Hashem is to do these videos or to visit the nursing home? Like, how do we know what he wants from us so that we can make that comparative study at the end of time that we got it right?
I think we all know, and you certainly know. Of all people, I think people do that.
Not necessarily.
No. There's okay. I'll let you give yourself. You just have to. You know what? You just have to. It's true. I maybe. Sometimes it takes time. You don't always know when you're 20 or when you're 30. Sometimes it's a little bit longer. But I think that if a person can pull themselves away from expectations, everybody has an inclination. I want to tell you something. There's a Chasidic teaching that says that whoever we're meant to be is in potential in us from the moment we're born, and only takes time to develop. And I can say that when I have 5 children. When several of my children were born, at the moment they were born, when I first saw them, I said, I see the personality already. Because, and I said to my wife, this one's going to be like this, and that one's going to be like that. I didn't always know what they're going to do, right? I knew the type of person they would be, because you see it on a child, and if a person follows and develops themselves in that way, so it will take them to do a certain type of thing, whether it's, I have one son doesn't matter, who's a very big giver. He does a lot of volunteer work. I can see things from the time he was a child he did that. So I think that's not so hard to know necessarily. Certainly if a person's first time is self-reflection and, thinking about life and not being distracted by external things, I think you can find out what your purpose is. But the next question is what you said. Okay, so now I know what it is, but how can I make sure that I do it within the context, which is a holy context or a spiritual context or religious context or helping context? Okay, that's a thing that has to do with more thinking about others, thinking about how I can give, thinking about, Baal Shem Tov said, in this world, he said, the man in the supermarket, he sells bread in order to make money for his family. And with the family goes into the supermarket to buy the bread for his family. He says, but that's in our world. In the world to come, like in the true world, the man in the supermarket is to be selling the bread for the sake of the man who needs it, And the man who goes to buy it will be buying it to give a livelihood to the one who sells it.
Right.
So it's not so much what we do, but how we do it, right? If you live a life thinking about others and thinking about God and thinking about adding good to the world, you're already halfway to doing what you have to do, you know?
Interesting.
And one last point, Rabbi Natan from Breslov, he writes, he says, if a person acts with, he said, Tmimut means if you do everything you do with sincerity, of the desire to do good and be good, and you do it sincerely, so even if you make a mistake, even if you go down the wrong way, so God will take you back, he'll move you to the right way, and all that time you did the wrong thing, he will count it as you were doing the right thing also, because you did it with a sincere heart.
Okay.
So in that sense, I think sincerity is really the most important thing.
Okay.
You know?
Rabbi, so I leave it now to you to run the show. Is there something?
No, I don't have any more. You know, you asked such great questions. I have nothing more to say. Oh, I can tell the story if you like.
Go ahead. You're known as a storyteller. I said we'd see your great storytelling skills at the end, so go for it.
Well, now I'm embarrassed.
Even though I got a glimpse of it all the way through. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm a little embarrassed. Okay, now I'll tell a story. This is one of the stories that happened to me. And it's in the book, but I didn't write it in my name. When I was living in New York when I was studying in university there. And I was 32, 33, 34, and I was still single. I didn't get married actually until I was 37, which is a whole story by itself. And I went through a very, very difficult period. And I felt very broken. And I felt very far from God. And I remember thinking to myself all the time, over and over, like, why is this happening to me? Like, why me? Why me? Why am I still single? Why am I endless dating, no end to the dating, right? And it couldn't find the right person. It was really hard, right? And I remember I was in Manhattan once, and I was just over and over thinking, why me? Like, why is this happening to me? You know? And I ate lunch, and I went to some bookstores. And then I saw it was time to pray, the afternoon prayers. So up on 91st Street on the west side, West End Avenue, there's a little synagogue there. So I thought, it was like time for the afternoon prayers. So I went over there, and I found a seat, and the room was slowly filling up. I found a seat up in the front, and I was waiting for them to start. And again, the whole time I was just thinking, why? Like, I was very obsessed, I guess. I was also very distraught. So as I'm sort of thinking this and kind of looking around the room a little bit, suddenly the door opens up to the synagogue, and a man walks in, and he catches my eye because he walks in very strange. He's like, as if he doesn't know where he is. He's touching he's sort of feeling the back of the chairs, and he seemed like disoriented. And it took me a minute to realize that he was blind. Now, he didn't have a cane. Maybe he left it outside, didn't have black glasses. But because he was blind, he sort of felt his way into the room. Now, I always thought, wow, I always find it's not nice to stare at a blind person. Obviously, some are not. But I always felt like such a different reality this person has. It would be so interesting. Not interesting. It would be scary. But what type of world is he in? Like, how does he know what's going on, and how does he relate, and how does he? So I was kind of looking at him, kind of sound in my eye a little bit. And he comes into the synagogue, and he feels his way, and I guess he knew his way around. And he came in, and he sat down right next to me. And I got shocked. I said, this is so strange. I said, why is he sitting next to me? Like, it's strange enough to see a blind man in synagogue, but like, what's going on? So I said, I feel there's a message here. I said, I feel there's a message here from God. But how can I know what it was? So I closed my eyes, and I said a deep prayer on the inside. And I said, God, if there's a message here, what is it? If you're trying to tell me something, what are you trying to tell me? And then at that moment, this like spark came to me. And I'm telling you, it wasn't like from me. It was like a radio signal from like a different dimension. I would have never thought of this on my own.
Okay.
And it was like it was a spark this is what it said. And I'm going to say it as if Hashem spoke to me. I can't say Hashem spoke to me, but I can definitely say it was like that, felt like that. He said, Eliezer, he said, you're asking me all the time, why me? Why me? Why are you suffering? Or why are you going through what you're going? Or why are you having such a hard time getting married? Or whatever it is, right? He says, you think you see everything. You think you see the big picture. You don't see anything. You see a little slice of reality. Do you see the things you've done in your life that maybe need to be fixed? Do you see what your future holds for you? Do you see previous incarnations? because Judaism believes in reincarnation? Do you see things you see just this? He says, you don't see any more than this blind man. He just doesn't see anything, just a little bit. He just knows and you just also see just a little bit. You're really more like him than you think, right? He says, and look how he goes through the world. He's careful, he's slow, he takes the help of others when they offer it, and he realizes limitations. You should also realize your limitations. Don't worry, everything's in my hand, and I'm taking care of it. And it was very beautiful. And I like all of a sudden, like, leave the wise to me. Hashem said, don't worry about it. And like it released this tremendous sort of doubt and questioning and turmoil. It just kind of passed at that moment, I mean, it came back later. These things are cyclical, they do come back. Right, but at that moment, it was very profound,
Well, that's really a beautiful story. So just on that note, so I'm going to wish you and all my viewers a Shana Tova, and Hashem should open our eyes and we should be able to see more of his beauty and his wisdom and his truth in this world and expand our consciousness, our lives, and commit ourselves both physically and mentally, spiritually to his way and to the Torah. I'm so grateful for your time, for your wisdom. I feel greatly, greatly enriched by having read your book. Greatly. Thank
you so much. Thank you.
I know why you called it The Face of the Waters. I think I know why, but also when you look in the water, it's whichever face is looking in, that's the reflection. And
beautiful.
So
beautiful.
What I brought to it and what it gave back, it was
beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. Rabbi, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let me bless you as well to continue your amazing work. And you should spread light of Torah and spread your neshama out. And you should be enriched and enrich others. And you're doing really wonderful work, Aliza. And Hashem should bless you in everything.
Amen. Thank you, Rabbi.
All right. Thank you for inviting me. Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.